Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our DOK Special from the end of the images of post-9/11 America. I'd like to start to ask Sophie about your motivation, your pictures, ideas about the United States and why you choose this specific topic for your work.
Well, for the people who didn't see the film, it's a bit of a documentary western, and that's because I have always been a big western movie fan since I was little until I was like now. And I had this fascination with the desert, but I was wondering while I watched the western movies, is that in the western movies the desert is always portrayed as empty. It's an empty space ready for the cowboys to settle in. And I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to search for all the traces of human life and in that desert. And that's why I chose the desert to make a movie about American identity.
Yeah, if I may ask you to continue, you choose this topic of executions and death penalty. And what was your motivation to do it? It's not about execution and death penalty, I guess. It's about the whole industry, which is all the whole context of it.
The first time I ever got to America was in 1990, I believe. In the first instance, you recognize it. You know it from television, you know it from the movies.
Just like in the movies, yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
When you arrive at Grand Central, New York, you know it, you're familiar with it. But once you get to know it, it looks familiar, it looks even a bit like Europe. You think you understand the country, but underneath is a whole different mentality of the people. And I just had to leave a film. I was watching Devil's Row, which is a brilliant film, I think, which started with the arrival of the Mayflower, I believe in 1620. And the country was taken by force. And that is still in the mentality of the people. It's a young country. So it looks familiar, it even looks a bit European, but underneath the mentality is totally different.
Ramon, you have made a film called Tease World, which is a very playful event. I just love this movie. So what was your intention to pick up this very American story?
I think this is actually the perfect room to discuss these issues, being that I think it's the new culture, new history, or recent history house, yeah? The beginning intuition for the film was to try to, you might never know this by watching the film, try to understand something about property and about accumulation, yeah? And I was working as a sort of writer and researcher academically in London, and well, you know, the early examples of the rights to property from John Locke always were citing this kind of this ideal of a savage land that was the New World. He'd never been there, but he imagined that there was this kind of savage land, this kind of organization of property and belongings and accumulation that was the basis for what is now how things are divided. And of course, America, being this land of the myth of the open space, was exactly that. And for me, the story of this man who has a collection of animals, it's an over-identification with this idea that it's a positive moral thing to accumulate and to have private property. Yeah, so that's the initial reason why I approached that subject.
Christoph, there's one scene in your film which I just love. You are protecting the American embassy in Berlin with a private, your own security company. And after that, you made an exhibition at Kassel, and then you tried to go to the United States. You had a scholarship. And if I get it right, you were denied or you were asked to leave the country because of this event. So what is your idea about the United States then, after an experience of that kind?
I think it's interesting to just give the impression with which somehow maybe a lot of us started. And there's this sentence, maybe it's famous, I don't know, and I don't know even if it's a famous director, but it goes like this, you know, every person who's alive today has two hometowns. So it's New York and his real one. And so maybe you know from who said that. I don't remember.
Not really.
And that's so something like, you know, carrying these images of America and even, you know, New York inside myself, and so it makes it, you know, a little bit. It's also a lot about myself then, or about my life, our life. You know, if we think about the U.S. in terms of that, it's really part of my living surroundings. So, and I have to, and that's where my work actually more is based more, you know, in the conflicts that raise from this point of view.
Shelley, after this first round, so do we have two hometowns? New York is one of it, and did this hometown change to the better or to the worse?
This question of the American, the mentality of the American people, I think that this is very, very difficult to talk this way. I mean, and perhaps even dangerous to talk this way. I think it's not a good thing to talk about any people in terms of a mentality. I mean, you could talk about a certain temperature, you could talk about, but unless you really go to the 50 some odd states, I think it's wrong to think this way. And I think that I made a film in 2008 called Incomplete World, and I did this just because I felt like I had to leave New York City. And, you know, this is 2008, so this is a kind of a different time. And, you know, I felt like the city was getting rich, that nobody was at all politicized, that, and I went out and talked to people on the street in all the different neighborhoods, and I was just so impressed by how thoughtful and how diverse what people were saying to me was, and it's not at all that I agreed with everybody, but I mean, the depth of thought and knowledge and diversity was there, so I don't know that you could pick out any American mentality. That said, that the thing that really captures the United States, that I think in part was captured by your film, I mean, the United States is huge. We barely have any borders, and there is a lot of empty space. And so you have this, you know, do you talk about Kansas? Do you talk about Ohio? Do you talk about a city within Ohio? And you do have this possibility for the media really to overtake, or a kind of paranoia to overtake. And, you know, just to say something about September 11th, that I was there, you know, I mean, I was very close, actually, to the World Trade Center. And the experience that I had was different than the people in Williamsburg. My neighborhood was shut down for a month. Nobody could get into it. Food couldn't get into it. You know, nothing was happening. We had no cell phones. We had no garbage service. Williamsburg, they were all at cafes, and then the experience in Texas was, again, completely different. So to talk about the American mentality, it's very difficult for me, the American experience, because it's many different experiences, even within the same city.
Still, from my point of view, it was interesting, you know, that even in New York, where you have the volunteer lawyers for the arts, as you know, they have a very, very strong, actually, civil institutions acting, you know, for, so to my, you know, my point of view, for persons like me, and no, there was nobody to step it, you know, to you know, hold a head, yeah, to shelter me. So, but anyway, I don't want to generalize too much. But I think it's a hard situation, which is about, you know, the globalization process and where are we going? And the thing is, where's the future? I think what is now interesting is where I'm maybe not looking so much at the U.S. is where's the future? So I want to see in the future, and where is it right now? Is it in a different place in the world? So, you know, that's.
I mean, just to add, I think that the real possibility to fight globalization is to maybe let go as much as possible of this thing like, who is an American, who is a German, but to really kind of make connections, make links, because finally we're all implicated. I mean, the corporations are everywhere. They have slightly different laws country to country, but the corporations have no countries. I mean, they have no allegiance. They just have this floating capital. And so, I mean, I think more and more it becomes a fight of all of us if one can see that, yeah.
What's most important is, I think, the images we get from America, they are very much narrowed about in a certain, just a certain focus.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, now that I'm from an exotic country, this is also a question that what images do, like any other exotic country, that, people come to us from foreign countries with this idea of America, and then these are the films that then get made, or there's a certain lack of complexity. I would say that with the democracy issue, and this I found interviewing, is that there are many people who know a lot about what's going on, but they feel like there's nothing they could do about it.
The question I have is somehow turning the theme here around and asking, has there really been a major qualitative difference in the US after 9/11?
Here the government is big and the people are big, and different politicians have different agendas for very complicated different reasons. Like on the one hand, keeping the internet free for consumer whatever, or on the other, I think that there's been a shift, and it's a lot of unexpected shifts also. I mean, it hasn't been like, we're portraying up on here, like you cut it with a knife, and there's pre, 9/11 and post 9/11. I think that the trajectory, was on its way already. The technology was on its way already. A lot of these things were happening, but this sort of rush, that Bush, there were many things Bush wanted to do before 9/11 that this gave him the opportunity to give. In terms of the mentality, it's shaped by many, many different things. And I think that maybe in Europe, it feels like it's more shaped by 9/11 than in the United States. I think.
Yeah, please.
I would just say that's a good question, and I also question 9/11 is just this marker that is used here, but obviously there was neoliberalism has its roots in the 70s, and but just speaking quantitatively and qualitatively, I think that we shouldn't make such a distinction. For example, if we talk about the nomos of the Earth being a drone order, and America being very important in that, I think there was something like 300 drones in the US Air Force pre-9/11, and now there's something like 40,000. And so I think that's quite significant, both quantitatively and qualitatively. So 9/11 was a moment that just unleashed this incredible, military budget, which is very important.
Yeah, it's sort of an excuse for anything you want to do. Anything is justified. It was just like, the most dangerous moment for me was directly after, where you had all of these academics, theorists, people who were against the war, against the militarization, like, let's step back, let's slow down. And they, at certain universities, were treated like traitors. And this is unbelievable. This was a moment, a terrifying moment, yeah, in the United States. And, still the reverberations are very much there, yeah.
I thank you very, very much. You enriched my day. You saved my day, actually. I learned a lot. Thank you very much for coming, and I wish you a nice last day of the festival. 2 days still. Thanks.